Hi, I'm Michael. I'm a small business owner, investor, improv artist, very, very neurotic, and always looking for something new and interesting to entertain me. I am a TV host and your host right now for what we call the Second Scene podcast. It's a Dweebs global production where you can go for free resume help, mental health assistance, and so much more. There's no catch, it's completely free, and we have mentors around the world ready to help. So that's dweebsglobal.org. So I'm here today with Jeremy Norrie. Jeremy has a whole host of scenes, some pretty crazy scenes, super interesting. He's a cannabis grower, a hash maker, a journalist, a cannabis journalist. He was on the ground level for the rise of MMA and the UFC as a journalist for some of the top publications, all the ones that I read right now. I was scanning them this morning. He is a filmmaker, director, producer, some films that for Amazon, Fox, and CBS streaming platforms. He has an IMDb page. My two dreams in life are to have an IMDb page and a Wikipedia page. So I have a ways to go. You're halfway there. So welcome. Thanks for being here with us.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah. Thank you for having me on. I like the opportunity.
So I thought I'd start with your filmmaking. When did you become a filmmaker?
So that's what I do now. And basically, I've been doing it for about 2 years, maybe going on 3 years or so. And well, successfully. I started my first film project about 8 years ago, the first real serious one. Okay. And I mean, I made a film when I was a kid just for fun, but yeah, as an actual career, only a couple years.
Right. How do you, because there's so many of us that like to do short films, like you. I have I go back and look at I have some black and white videos that I had done as a kid. It was that long ago on this little tiny film.
Sure.
Send in the film to get it processed. And then I have my mini VHS tapes I've done. So
oh yeah, my first one I did with 2 VCRs and a Discman. So I'm right there with you.
There you go. So how do you change from just doing it as a hobby to actually being somewhat successful? And
so there's a variety of ways to do this in the film industry. Typically you would go to film school and you would follow the normal path. Like, this is not the path that I followed. So I have a unique experience. I basically made my own film and then tried to pitch it and realized, there was a lot of trial and error during this whole process, shall we say. And I was fortunate enough through a friend of a friend to make people who are already in the film industry and doing, film work and other things already. And it seems like your two main ways people get in is like the traditional way where you make something, maybe you enter it into film festivals and you get some attention from somewhere, or you just keep working, you work for somebody and eventually work your way up the ladder. Or somebody from the film industry just kind of like brings you in like an apprentice almost, so to speak, where they just open the doorway to filmmaking for you for whatever reason. Maybe you're a celebrity, maybe, they just see a value in you for whatever reason that is. And that's kind of what it was like for me. So I just plugged away real hard. I made my own film. And then, luckily what we had was interesting enough to people to where that door eventually got open for me, but it was hard.
What was this film that you first did?
So it brings me back to my previous experience in the cannabis industry. So I was in the cannabis industry for a long time, grew, I made hash, and eventually we started doing these competitions for hash, and they were traveling around the United States. And I did a even bigger event in California eventually too. There was just like a huge concert, and cannabis events were booming for a while. And this little event we had was really the spirit of the movement of the culture of cannabis at the time. And so we were really fortunate to be kind of early adopters of this new kind of hash. And then we were ambassadors of it, bringing it around to other places and bringing attention to the other people who were doing those things in different states. And we knew we had something special. So I started filming this event, and I thought, originally maybe we could make some videos to promote the event, but it was really expensive and the quality of the film work was really good. And so I thought maybe we could make a documentary out of this. I'm a big film fan, just from growing up, and
I love documentaries myself. I'm like, lately I'm so hooked on them. A lot of people don't know what hash is, though. You want to explain?
Okay, sure.
People know cannabis is marijuana. What does that do?
And I gloss over stuff like that sometimes. So thank you for bringing me back. Hash is basically concentrated marijuana. So you have the cannabis plant. The female plant has the oil that we want. And it, sometimes people have seen like really close-up shots, and it looks almost like a little mushroom, like thousands of them all growing out of the leaves. And those are called trichomes. And basically hash is a way of separating those from the plant. And there's a variety of ways of doing that. And essentially they're all the same in that they're all just concentrated forms of the part of the plant we want, the oils of the plant.
So it's a lot more potent?
Yes, it can be very, very potent. Certain kinds of hash are a little less potent, and then the finesse in making the hash can give you something that is very, very fine and really well refined to something that's maybe not so well refined and kind of dirty. So
so you've been making hash for a long time as well.
Oh, right? Yeah, I made hash. I made all the different kinds of hash. I'm definitely better at certain kinds than others. So
what does that even mean, different kinds? I guess.
So it's similar to alcohol in a way, where you can refine alcohol to have it be like vodka, or you can have it be like kind of whiskey. And there's different processes to get these different kinds of alcohol. Effects can be slightly different too, and but they all generally are the same family. They're more similar than they are different in a lot of ways.
So you've gotten progressively better at it, more advanced at it, but I guess when you started, this might not have been a legal thing you were doing, or this might have been what?
Sure.
Back then,
there was the internet at the time, and that was where a lot of my learning kind of came in. And I was afraid, some of my friends were doing it before I did it, and the product that they were making, I was very skeptical of the health benefits. I would consume it maybe a little, but like this was not my thing at all at first. And then, when I also went to Amsterdam at a pretty young age. So when you go to somewhere like that, hash is a part of their culture. It's already had a whole journey of, scrutiny. So there is fine hash and there's garbage hash, and you can kind of see pretty dramatically what the differences are real quick when you're just in town and talking to people. I was there for the Cannabis Cup, so it was like the conversation of where you could get the best hash in town. Being an American, that was super rare, so you wanted to do that,
right? Yeah, I got stuck at a couple of coffee houses for many more hours than I had planned when I walked in, and
sure,
time goes by. And
to me, that's still the epitome of cannabis. I've been to quite a lot of the epicenters of cannabis now. I've been to Spain and seen their scene. That's kind of the new leading place in Europe, but it's not like Amsterdam. Amsterdam, like you see those coffee shops, they got like neon lights, Mickey stoned out of his mind. There's like, there's no, they're not toning it down at all. It's in your face. They're not worried who they're offending. They're not worried about like anything, basically.
Right. For people that don't know, coffee shops, instead of serving coffee, they serve marijuana. And
yeah, exactly. It's like, so the way that cannabis kind of became accepted into Amsterdam culture was this gradual process of them kind of just pushing the limits. And so the first places that would sell cannabis were coffee houses. And it just kind of became adopted that that's like their version of a dispensary. And they literally have little stickers that say coffee shop, and with green and white, it means they can sell weed.
Okay. So when you start, God, I'd love to go back to Amsterdam. It's so long ago.
Beautiful place.
Oh, it is. It is. It's just amazing how many, even back then, 20 years ago, everyone was on bicycles. Like they had, like America's so far behind. We're like just putting in our bicycle lane.
Oh yeah. The way that their streets work is like, they've got the traffic then they've got a little curb, and then they've got a bicycle lane, and then they've got the sidewalk.
Right.
And you know, it's just so much more well designed for cars and for, you know, people. I love it.
For an American there, stoned, it was quite difficult crossing the street the first couple times. I think
But for the most part, we don't die, you know.
No, we don't. You might get hit by a bike. You get some nasty looks until you figure it out. But
Yeah, it's pretty good. My very first film was my first trip to Amsterdam. So that one that I made as a kid that was for fun, we made it in '99. I went to the Cannabis Cup, and my friend brought his video camera, and I took it everywhere we went. I cut like, say, 10 hours of footage down into about an hour, and it's just like the highlights of our trip. And you know, it was a good time.
That's great. That's great. Just to also explain to people, when you say a gram of hash, how long does that typically last somebody, and how much is that?
So it depends what somebody we're talking about. So for the average to novice smoker, that might last you a pretty long time. You know, you could maybe, it's depending on how often you're smoking and how you're using it. So like, if you're using it as a topper with cannabis, or like on an occasional thing to kind of up your strength level of the cannabis that you're consuming, you can make it last, you know, maybe a month. That would be a long time to make a gram of hash last. For people like me and friends of mine, I mean, they'll roll a whole gram into one joint. So like, it can be, you know, used up in a couple minutes, or it could last you a very long time. It's really on how you want to conserve it and how often you're consuming, you know.
Right. I think with marijuana, there's really like, there's tolerance, but then there's also, everyone kind of reacts differently. Everyone can handle different amounts.
And you know, it's culture too. Like, so for me, the people that I know that are deep in the scene, everything they do, we gotta smoke before, we gotta smoke after. You know, it's like that song, smoke 2 joints in the morning, smoke 2 joints at night, smoke all the time. And then other people would be like, I'll go a week, I don't smoke, maybe I smoke on the weekend once or something like that. So
right. I used to be a big smoker. I honestly don't smoke anymore. It hasn't been good for my mental health. Like, some people just don't react to it the same way.
and it changes as you get older too.
Most definitely. So when you were younger, did you have any close calls when you were?
I had so many. It depends even what you want to mean as a close call. So
as far as getting in trouble, like in the States, it wasn't legal until recently, but you've been doing it
absolutely.
a long time, so.
So, I mean, I had like tickets for possession and things like that I got in trouble. I got my pipes taken and that kind of stuff. And when I sold pot out of my house for a while. So I was living in Encino, and I had like my own little apartment condo, and I got robbed there. I got home invaded there. I mean, I've had all kinds of crazy things. And then throwing my events, I was going to other states and throwing essentially what is an illegal cannabis event. We like to say quasi-legal. We tried to follow the laws that there were, but we knew at any point in time, somebody of authority could push us and, you know, make us pay or you know, hold us accountable for doing these events in some sort of a way. Right. So, and like, I had so many close calls. I had canine units show up at an event. I've had, when I flew to Spain, I got met with military police getting off the plane.
Why was that? You got to explain that.
So that's the one everybody likes to hear about.
And I go to Spain all the time, so it's
okay. So when you go to, so you know this. So when you go to Spain, there's a whole process, and you go to anywhere pretty much. There's a process of them kind of looking through your bags and doing the whole thing. And there's the part where they look through your like personal carry-on bags. And there's the part where they look through, or they kind of scan your bags that are big, you know, that just go stored on the plane that you pick up once you get there. So that process is pretty different. You generally don't know what, if they see anything or have a problem with your bag that's going on the plane, you don't really know that until way later on. If you've got a problem with your carry-on, you know about that right away, you know? So I had gone through the whole process. I had brought all these trophies and things like that we were going to be giving away for the event. So I had all kinds of things that were like big metal, electronic, like I had glass, I had all kinds of stuff, and like lots of little things. And, you know, I can only imagine what they look like in a metal detector. If you scan my bag, it probably look like an explosive device, maybe. I mean, it could have looked like anything.
Right.
So,
Were these smoking devices? Were these?
oh yes, for the most part, they're all somehow related to cannabis, either that they are smoking devices or they are accessories that you would use with your smoking device. Like, you know, we had stash containers, you know, things that for smoking the oil. The process is difficult because it's a liquid. So there were torches that people had, like powerful one. You couldn't use a regular lighter. They were all worked up. They had artwork all over them, and like they didn't look like, you know.
I mean, they're beautiful. Bongs, the
Sure.
tall glass ones are called bongs. These smoke up. They're beautiful.
Sure.
They are pieces of art. I mean, some of the most beautiful blown glass
Yeah,
pieces
it's
of
a
art.
huge thing. If you don't know about glass art, the cannabis industry has pushed the glass art industry tremendously and created hundreds of colors and all kinds of things that never existed before.
Right.
So I wasn't super worried.
Well, you were traveling. They weren't. I'm assuming they weren't used at this point. So they were completely clean, and
yeah, absolutely. Everything
essentially
was
they're
clean.
being sold as tobacco.
And I've traveled to Amsterdam, come back, and then got in trouble by having things that were dirty and, you know, that kind of thing in the past. I've had plenty of experience, so I knew going, like, okay, I got to have nothing. But what I will also say is this: sometimes people that are close friends of mine in the industry can get me to do things that they know I've done, and, you know, we all have this kind of like outlaw mentality. So I had an entry into the event, like a hash entry, somebody that couldn't go to Spain, but they wanted to compete in the competition. So they gave me their entry and I hid it inside of one of these boxes of one of these accessories. So there was risk involved in this.
You thought it was a good idea to hide hash inside of a pipe.
I've been, you know, going into Amsterdam, going into places like that for the most part, not so difficult, like coming from America. It's usually when you're coming back into America where they're like, we want to know everything. Going there, I mean, nobody even talks to me going to Amsterdam for the most part. I get off the plane and I walk right into the airport, and, you know, nobody cares. Right. So I figured that was going to be my same experience in Spain.
I know, but normally people would hide it in like a benign, like a bunch of toothpaste or like.
Well, also, so I have this is like 30 grams of hash. You know, it's not a small amount. It's a lot. It's enough to get me in pretty serious trouble.
Now I'm adding international drug smuggler to your intro.
Exactly. So I get on the plane, no problems, you know, fly to Spain, no problems. I get sick on the plane, so I'm not feeling the best. I'm like getting off the plane, and there is a military policeman waiting. So not at the end, like when you're in the airport. This is literally from the hole in the plane. He's standing right there. Okay. So as I exit the plane, there's no way for me to get off this plane without passing this guy, unless I like climb through the wheel well or something. And so I walk out. He has my picture, and it's my passport photo. And he's like, hey, and there's communication where he's clearly asked the TS, like the flight people, to let him know when I was getting off, like, so that there was no confusion. And there was like, okay, this is confirmation, this is the person, blah, blah, blah. So I know, okay, so I'm a person of interest here. I don't really know what's going on. And I know that it's best to keep my cool in these kind of situations. So I'm nice. I'm like, okay, they want to look at me. Let's see what's going on here. I also felt like I had not been in violation of anything. So it's likely that this could be something I could avoid any sort of penalty for. So let's see what happens. He's got a machine gun, you know, like he looks like an army guy. He's military police. And he's got this little like hat on and the whole thing. And he's like, there's no problem. He keeps telling me that there's no problem, but I need to just come with him. And I'm like, okay. And we're walking through the airport, and I said, you know, can you tell me a little bit about why, you know? He's like, there's no problem. No, everything's good. Right. Like, I get the feeling like I might, like, if I ran in the airport, it's potentially possible I could get away from this guy somehow. And so he's being like super cautious that I don't do anything erratic or like, you know? And so I just walk with the guy. He takes me under to this like area where there's lots of these military police people. And there's tables all over, and they take me to a table, and they've got all my luggage on this table. They're all open, but nobody's gone through them yet. Okay. And there's like 8 guys, maybe girls too, I can't remember. And they're like waiting to go through my luggage. And so here I come, and they're like, okay, we're going to go through your luggage. Is that okay? They need my permission or something. And so I'm like, yeah, no problem. Go for it. So they start going through my luggage, and, you know, I have 3 bags. Most of the bags are normal stuff. It's like just normal stuff. They're going through it, and there's one bag that's all the stuff for the event. They're going through this bag, and they're pulling out like boxes, but they're not like they're not like the American police. They're not like super thorough. They're just pulling this stuff out. They're kind of looking at it and putting it down, and then they start talking to each other. Now, my event, I had timed at the same time as a Spanish event that's pretty big for selling seeds. And there's no cannabis at the event. They just sell accessories and stuff like that. And there's all these booths at the event. So I hear them start to say to each other, Festival de Cannabis. And then they say the city that event is in. I can't remember where it was. It was like Castel de Fels or somewhere like that, you know? And they're like, Festival de Cannabis. They keep saying it to each other. And so then there's one of them that speaks English. And he says to me, he's like, oh, are you here for the Festival de Cannabis and such? And I'm like, yes. He's like, all this stuff, you have a booth there? I'm like, yep, that's what it is. And he's like, oh, do you have the paperwork? I'm like, oh, I don't know if I have that. Like, he's like, don't even worry about it. I pack up all my stuff and out I go.
I don't know how you stayed cool that whole time.
Yeah, well, through a lot of experience. And let me tell you, inside, physical chaos going on.
You were dying inside.
Yeah, of course. You know, there's like panic.
Yeah, picturing the jail cell, picturing where they were gonna, who you were gonna call.
I don't know what's gonna happen here. We've all seen those movies, so.
So now you sell. So you sell. What do you do in the industry at this point? That is
in cannabis, I'm currently not doing anything other than making films related to cannabis. So, doing all that stuff for the years and like traveling, and part of it is recreational, you know, part of it is fun. I love it. I treat it like wine. I'm into all the different nuances of the whole thing. But then you meet, and some of my use is medical. And then you also meet people who have like tremendous medical necessities that cannabis helps them with. I wanted to give light to a lot of those stories. My very first 3 films are all about cannabis and cancer and medical cannabis in general. And as I'm proceeding in the film industry, I have a variety of projects that are stories about cannabis pioneers, or, you know, some sort of cannabis story that I want to bring light to. And that's what I'm doing for right now.
Okay, that's great. What have you seen firsthand cannabis do for a cancer patient?
Oh, so in my movies, we have some pretty powerful stories where they are entirely cured, and they are fairly convinced that it is from taking cannabis. They had gone through this long, rigorous process of normal medical process of dealing with cancer, and then having like really negative responses to that, some positive, some negative, and then just kind of the story of how they actually treated their cannabis, their cancer with cannabis. That's something left out in all the movies where they talk about this stuff. They always tell you, oh, good news, cannabis can help you with this problem or with that problem. But they don't really get into like how you are supposed to do this. And people a lot of times walk away thinking, I'm going to smoke joints and this is going to somehow help me with this serious medical problem that I have. And most of the time that's not true. So we get into it. Yeah, you have to consume it, and you pretty much have to consume massive amounts of concentrated cannabis. Even smoking it, like, so we smoke hash, that's not good enough for the most part. You know, you can get a lot of therapeutic benefit. There's like pain relief. There's some stuff that it definitely helps with. But when we're talking about like cancer, when we're talking about serious illnesses, you have to be eating it. And then to further that, you probably shouldn't be eating things that are like cupcakes or, you know,
Right.
bad food. You want to be consuming this in the most healthy way possible.
Right. No sugar.
So,
Essentially, no sugar.
exactly. You don't want things that have a bunch of vegetable oils in it either. And, you know, you want stuff that's like basically just a pill that is the concentrated cannabis or something to that effect. As little bad things as possible.
Does the pill have the high effect, or do they most of this cannabis?
So yes, and the amount that they tell these cancer patients to take is frightening even to me. So I smoke hash every day. To eat a whole gram or more of concentrated cannabis every day, that's powerful. That's a lot.
Right.
You know?
Can't they grow it with aren't there strains though that have reduced that for medical reasons?
In a way, but basically what the biggest problem with the whole thing right now is that we don't have isolated chemicals or isolated strains that we know what part of the plant is, you know, helping the problem. So the best way to help the problem is just to give like a bouquet of all the chemicals that you could possibly get. We call it full spectrum. And you want to just have as much as you could possibly have in that blend, so that you're hoping your body distributes the parts that you need to the places that you need it. And generally that is through these concentrated amounts. And at the moment, there's no way to avoid that. So you start small and you work your way up, kind of like other medicines, you know?
Right. So you also were early on, you were a journalist. So you were a journalist in the cannabis industry and also MMA.
Yeah, so that's how I got started in the cannabis industry. I originally was a fan of MMA. I went to my local video store one day and they had like this section that was like occult. And there were like, you know, the Faces of Death movies were there and really off the wall, crazy stuff. And one of the things they had on that wall was the first two UFCs. They had UFC 1 and they had UFC 2. And I was a fan of pro wrestling also. I loved pro wrestling growing up. And at that time, there were all these weird little like pro wrestling fighting kind of spin-offs that you would see on TV and be like, oh, cage match. And
so just so people know, pro wrestling was more fake. Pro wrestling, still super skilled people. They still get injured. It still takes an incredible athlete to do it, but it's pretty much
predetermined outcomes. You know, like these aren't competitive fights. These are performances, like stunts. And so like that's what they all were. And I saw the UFC and you're like, is this real or is it not real? The only way to kind of really know was to rent the video. So I did. And I became a fan right away. I remember calling my dad in and be like, look, Dad, see, it's real. This is real. Like, this isn't like the wrestling.
And it's actually real. The UFC is one of the biggest sports right now. But yeah, back then.
It was crazy for a little while. And the events were these like tournaments and it got ugly quickly. And I lost interest in it relatively soon because it was tough for somebody to go from the very beginning of the tournament to the very end of the tournament just without injuries, let alone winning all their fights.
That's what they would do. It wasn't like now, it's more like boxing where there's matches every week. If you win, you'll fight again like 3 months down the road. But then it was tournaments in a day. Like it was.
Yeah, and even if you do see a tournament, it's generally like maybe 2 fights. You know, sometimes there's 3. Like in kickboxing, they do this pretty often, where they'll have maybe 2 fights to 3 fights in a night, and that's, you know, crazy still. Sometimes people get injured, and so also the government took a huge stance against the UFC, and this is kind of how I got to be doing anything. They banned it on all these pay-per-view. You know, you could only get it on the internet. It was this underground thing. It was losing money. It was becoming this really small thing, and I met a guy that was still hardcore into it. I'd kind of lost track of it, and he was still into it. And he's like, no, you can see it here. He was showing me videos, and then there was this new organization in Japan. He was showing me videos of this, and I was loving it. Yep, Pride, exactly. So early on in Pride, and he was showing me the guys, and he's like, look, this guy Sakuraba, look at this guy Vanderlei Silva, and so I'm like, oh my god.
One of the reasons Pride was pretty exciting back in the day is it was a lot of guys on heavy steroids. They were like beyond human, like they were.
It was run by the Yakuza, like, and they were doing crazy stuff. They loved the spectacle, so they would put big guys against small guys. They would do all kinds of stuff like that. And they would sign fights in like the week before the event, and like huge fights. And so it was the wildest, rock star kind of, and it was huge. It was so much bigger than UFC. I think the biggest Pride event was like almost 100,000 people.
Wow, they never come there. Japan was eating it up. They loved it. Yeah.
It was crazy, and I got hooked. I started watching, I started following it super hard. And then as I was going to these websites, I started realizing, oh, there's like an opportunity here to like write for these other websites that were new, that were coming out. And I had always done well in English class. And one of the websites that was fairly new at the time was MMA Weekly. And MMA Weekly put out a thing. They're like, we need writers. We need people to write stories for our website. And I applied for that, and they liked what I wrote. And so I got a job writing every week for MMA Weekly. And it was a good thing for a long time. And eventually I did writing for other websites. And I just also like to write for fun on one of the cannabis websites. Somebody saw me on there, and they're like, I have a magazine I'm going to come out with it. It's print. It's not just an online thing. And I thought, oh, this is my first time to write something and have it like printed. I'll do that. And so I started writing for the Cannabis magazine. Then that started like bringing me to all these people in California that were the heads of these cannabis businesses. And I was, getting kind of indoctrinated into the industry in this way that was super a lot of these people, they had their own group. They didn't let outsiders into their group. This is still an outlaw thing to a big degree. And I was getting welcomed in to all these different families, all these different communities. It was a really awesome time.
Nice. Do you still do any of the writing?
So I think I wrote something for a magazine like a couple years ago or something, but no, I don't do any writing right now. I would love to. I still every now and then like to write, and I'm writing a book kind of about all my horror stories from the cannabis industries. So that's what people love to hear about.
Of course.
So yeah.
So you really go through a whole career and you tie a knot around it, and you move on to the next.
Yeah. I would love to also get back to throwing cannabis events. There's certain things that I would love to get back to, but like there's also a part of me that just fundamentally looks towards life, in that I don't want to negatively be looking back on my past, and I don't want to be chasing some sort of dream that I need to let go. And moving on, for the most part, is a healthy thing for humans. And when I think about myself and I look back at those times, I try to focus on looking back at them as like positive, wonderful experiences, but not getting lost in the trying to recreate that experience, because generally that never goes well. So
that's wise. So, well, coming full circle back to the films. So you created your first documentary, essentially, is what it was, with your own money, your own.
Thankfully the events were doing well. And that one that I shot when I was a kid, that was 100% our own money. I've used my friend's video camera, but like I bought all the videotapes, and I did it all on my own time. And so that was all my own money. But then we used the money from the events. The events were doing well enough that they're profitable enough that I could put advertising money into the like marketing kind of the event. And we were hoping for a more quick outcome, but it is what it is. So I spent quite a lot of money. It's by far the most money I ever have spent on making a movie.
You can tell looking at your IMDb page, the profession, you're getting more professional as you go.
Sure. Yeah. And I wanted to take on more and more serious subjects too. Like we went from cannabis to like Bigfoot and UFOs and stuff like that, which I do love. And those are interests of mine, but I don't want to be known as like the UFO guy. So we did some other more serious topics. We did mindfulness very recently. And that one is like a really, doing that film was super good for me. And I feel very, very strongly that should be something everybody kind of looks into and starts practicing more. It'd be super beneficial for the whole planet.
Agreed. There's a lot of people think that that's voodoo as well, and there's not. There's science. It is science, scientifically backed.
Even if you're not getting into like the full-on thing, just being more thoughtful about the things that you do is generally a good rule.
Right. Be more present. What are you doing for CBS, Amazon, and Fox? What type of work are you doing for them at this point?
So when we release movies, typically they are released on Amazon Prime. But right now, Amazon Prime has a hold on new documentaries. And we don't know exactly why this is. We think that it's because they were getting bombarded with fuzzy math type of documentaries. Amazon has kind of been slowly paying us less and working less and less with independent filmmakers. Mm-hmm. The other platforms that are newer are starting to really step up. So CBS has a platform. It's called Pluto TV, and it is a free app that you can download, and everything on there is free. And they have all kinds of channels, and it's a real different kind of approach. And they're starting to kind of bring in new things and change it up and be a little bit more friendly. They're listening to the people, and that stuff's great. And a few of our things are on Pluto TV. But Fox has really stepped up for independent filmmakers, and their platform is called Tubi TV. It is also a free app that you can download, and everything on there is free. And they've been picking up everything we make, basically. Maybe there's like 2 or 3 of our films that aren't on there at this point, but almost everything that I've made, you can now watch free on Tubi TV. And that's no membership, nothing, it's 100% free.
Right. How do you get in?
So we use a distributor. We have a couple different distributors that are independent they're geared towards independent filmmakers. So we submit our films to them. If they accept our film, and we kind of know what they're looking for at this point. And my partner has 25 years experience. He edited for like Fox TV for a while, and he has a lot more experience than me. And so he kind of knows the parameters of what we got to do and how to present it to them so that everything gets accepted.
Okay. Well, keep working. You're doing some stuff that I wish I was doing. I would love to be out there doing some documentaries, filming and editing. I used to love that stuff. You're making me.
Part of it is just doing it, another, like one of the big traditional ways is you can like just get out there, make your own thing, and then enter it into film festivals. And there's a lot that you can enter for free. So.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Where can people find you?
So the best way to find my movies is to put in my full name, Jeremy Norrie, into the website imdb.com, and then you'll get a list of all my movies. You can look those movies up wherever you watch streaming. So they're not going to be everywhere. They're not on Netflix. They're not on some of the bigger platforms, but on a lot of the smaller platforms, we have movies, especially like if you're into UFOs, they're on the UFO streaming platforms. If you're into mindfulness, you'll probably find those on a lot of the self-help platforms. They're on hundreds, but primarily they're on Amazon Prime, Tubi TV, and Pluto TV. So go to my Instagram. It's at Sky Island Storytelling. And it's the same on Facebook. And on Twitter, it is Sky Island Stories.
Okay, so Sky Island Stories, and search for Jeremy Norrie, Norrie, and check out his films. Pretty neat stuff. Thank you so much for being here today with us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. My pleasure. Again, this is a Dweebs Global production. They supply free mentorship help for people around the world. They have over 500 volunteers offering free help from mental health assistance to resume writing. Check them out at dweebsglobal.org. I'll see y'all next week.